focus, strength, mastery.
There comes a day in every man's life when he looks in the mirror and realizes something. He is tired of being shaken, tired of reacting, tired of letting the world decide how he feels. And on that day, a new version of him begins to rise. The question is simple. Will you rise too? Part 1. There was a young man named Samuel who lived his life like a leaf in the wind. Every little jab, every silent rejection, every passing insult, it all reached into him and twisted something inside. He reacted fast, spoke without thinking, and carried scars from words that were never meant to last. His peace belonged to the world, and the world used it freely. But this is not the story of the man he was. This is the story of the man he became. Samuel once believed that pain was proof he was alive. If someone criticized him, his heart raced. If someone mocked him, he defended himself before he even understood what he was defending. Life tossed him around like a small boat in a storm. He thought this was normal. He thought everyone lived this way. Then one evening, while sitting in a quiet library, he overheard an older gentleman speaking to a group of young men. The man had a calm presence, the kind that makes others lower their voices without being asked. His eyes were steady, the kind that had seen storms and refused to bow to them. Samuel leaned in and listened. The older man said, "The world does not hurt you. You hurt yourself when you react without thought. A calm mind is a powerful mind." Those words struck Samuel harder than any insult he had ever received. Because they were true. He realized then that most of his pain came not from what happened to him, but from how he responded to it. That night, Samuel walked home differently. He walked slow. He thought about how often he let the world pull him out of his center. One glare from a stranger ruined his day. One careless comment from a coworker replayed in his head for hours. One rejection felt like a storm he could not escape. He lived like a puppet, reacting to every pull on the string. But he also realized something else. Every man has the power to cut those strings. The choice is always there. The courage to make that choice is what separates the weak from the unshakable. The next morning, Samuel made a decision. He would train his mind the way a soldier trains for war. Not with force, but with discipline. He began observing himself. Every time he felt anger rising, he paused. Every time someone interrupted him, he breathed. Every time someone tried to provoke him, he watched quietly without responding. At first it was difficult. His old habits pulled on him like chains. His body wanted to react. His thoughts wanted to defend. His pride wanted to strike back. But he remembered the older man's words and he forced himself to wait. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. A small pause. A small moment of control. And slowly, something inside him began to change. One day at work, a coworker mocked Samuel in front of others. It was the kind of insult that would have once sent him into a heated argument. Everyone turned to see how he would respond. But Samuel did not react. He did not defend himself. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at the man with calm eyes, smiled a quiet smile, and returned to his work. The room fell silent. The insult lost all its power. And Samuel gained something he never had before. Authority. Because silence is not weakness. Silence is strength in its purest form. The strongest man is not the man who must speak to prove his worth. The strongest man is the one who could speak but chooses not to. Samuel noticed something remarkable over the following weeks. The less he reacted, the more respect he received. People sought his opinion. People watched him. People lowered their voices when he entered the room. Not out of fear. Out of admiration. He had become the oak tree that does not tremble with every wind. But his real transformation happened on a day when someone spread lies about him. Old Samuel would have confronted the person instantly. He would have tried to clear his name. He would have given the situation all his energy. But the Samuel who was growing into a stronger man remembered a simple truth. Time reveals truth. Always. So he stayed silent. He kept working. He kept growing. And within days, the truth came out on its own. The person who spread the lies lost credibility. Samuel gained even more respect. People saw strength in the way he refused to react. His silence spoke louder than 100 arguments ever could. Samuel was learning the first law of inner mastery. You cannot control the world. But you can control your response. And that response shapes your entire life. Every time he stayed calm, he rewired a part of his mind. Every time he paused, he built muscle in his spirit. Every time he refused to flinch, he told the world, "You cannot break me unless I allow it." This is when Samuel realized something powerful. The world tests every man. It pushes him, mocks him, rejects him, challenges him. Not to break him, but to teach him mastery over himself. And most men fail these tests because they react before they think. But the man who pauses, the man who observes, the man who controls his emotions instead of being controlled by them, that man becomes unshakable. Samuel began to understand that the mind commands the body, not the other way around. Every reaction was a choice. Every moment of anger was an invitation to stay small. Every argument was a door leading away from his future. So he chose differently. He began to rise. Quietly, calmly, powerfully, Samuel discovered the truth that every great leader, every successful man, every unshakable warrior has learned: what you ignore, you outgrow. And what you outgrow can never control you again. By mastering his silence, Samuel was mastering himself. Not by denying emotions, but by refusing to be ruled by them. He was becoming the man he was always meant to be. A man who stands tall. A man who stays calm. A man who cannot be shaken by storms because he carries his peace within him. And this is where your journey begins. Because part 1 is about building the foundation. The foundation of calm. The foundation of discipline. The foundation of self-mastery that will guide you through every trial. Every insult. Every rejection. Every test. The question now is simple. Are you ready to become unshakable? Part 2. The training of the unshakable mind. Engaging hook. There comes a turning point in every man's life when he realizes the real battle is not with the world. It is with the reactions inside him. And when a man learns to master those reactions, he becomes someone the world cannot bend. Part 2. Samuel's transformation did not end with silence. Silence was only the beginning. The next lesson came in a moment that felt like failure but became the doorway to strength. Point 1. Cold morning, Samuel stood in front of his manager at work. He had prepared for a promotion he believed he deserved. He had practiced his conversation. He walked into the office full of hope. But that hope shattered when the manager told him, calmly and without emotion, that the position had been given to someone else. In the past, Samuel would have flinched. His shoulders would have dropped. His voice would have cracked. Disappointment would have flooded him like a wave he could not escape. But this time, he stood still. He breathed. He lifted his chin slightly. He thanked his manager and walked out with quiet confidence. The rejection hurt. It always hurts. But Samuel realized something powerful the moment he left that office. The world expects men to fold. It expects them to sink inside themselves. It expects them to react. And when a man refuses to react, he rewrites the rules. He walked out of the building and stood under the open sky. The cold wind tapped his face like a reminder. Life was still moving. And so should he. He did not pause. He did not sigh. He did not sit in the parking lot replaying the moment. Instead, he walked toward his next task with full focus. This was his first lesson in eliminating the flinch. To starve the old response by giving it no room to breathe. Samuel remembered the words the older man had once spoken in the library. Walk into discomfort. Look fear in the eye. Stand tall when your spirit wants to bend. Do this every day and you will rewire your mind. So he practiced. Not in big dramatic ways, but in small daily moments that most men overlook. When he felt nervous speaking in a meeting, he forced himself to speak anyway. Even when his voice trembled. When someone looked at him with intimidation, he looked back calmly. Not aggressively. Simply steady. When a situation became uncomfortable, instead of escaping it, he stayed just a little longer. And every time he held his ground, something inside him shifted. It was as if his mind was learning that he did not break in discomfort. He grew in it. Point 1. Afternoon, Samuel visited a local gym. He wanted to challenge himself physically the same way he was challenging himself mentally. He stepped into a cold shower after his workout. The shock of the water hit him like needles. His body wanted to jump away. His breath quickened. His instinct screamed, pull back. But Samuel stayed there. He breathed slower. He told himself he could endure. And within seconds his mind settled. His body adjusted. The discomfort became manageable. This was more than a cold shower. It was training. It was practice. It was proof that the flinch response can be broken by staying present. By refusing to run. By choosing stillness where fear wants movement. In the same week, Samuel experienced another test. He attended a meeting at work where tensions were high. People argued back and forth. Pride filled the room like heat. Accusations were tossed across the table. Everyone talked louder. No one listened. Samuel felt the same old tension rising in him. His chest tightened. His jaw clenched. His thoughts raced forward like a storm. The old Samuel would have jumped into the chaos. He would have spoken too quickly. He would have reacted from emotion instead of purpose. But the man he was becoming remembered his training. He leaned back slightly in his chair. He breathed deeper. He watched the room instead of joining it. He became the observer instead of the participant. He was calm in a place where calmness had vanished. Everyone else wanted to be right. Samuel wanted to be clear. When the room finally paused, Samuel spoke one sentence. A simple sentence. A steady sentence. A sentence that clarified the entire issue and guided the room back to reason. The room fell silent. People listened. Not because he spoke loudly. Not because he forced his opinion. But because his calmness carried weight. A calm mind commands attention more powerfully than an angry voice ever can. After the meeting, a coworker approached him. She said, "I do not know how you stayed so calm." People respect that. It makes you seem unshakable. Samuel smiled. Not out of pride. Out of understanding. Because the truth was becoming clear to him. The world does not respect noise. The world respects clarity. And clarity comes from calm. That night, Samuel sat by his window looking at the dark sky. He reflected on how many opportunities he had lost in the past because of hesitation and flinching. Times when he wanted to speak but fear silenced him. Times when life tested him but he backed away. He felt the weight of those lost chances. But instead of regret, he felt determination. He whispered to himself, "Enough." Samuel made a promise. He would no longer let fear take the first step for him. He would meet rejection and walk toward the next door without pause. He would step forward when his instinct tried to pull him back. He would choose strength in the moments where weakness once lived, because the truth had become crystal clear. A man becomes unshakable not by avoiding discomfort but by walking into it again and again until fear loses its voice. Samuel thought about the wisdom of stillness. He realized that most men drown in their own reactions. They speak too quickly. They panic too soon. They fight battles that do not matter. They lose their peace because they never learn to guard it. But a man with calm inside him sees the world differently. He sees solutions where others see problems. He sees opportunities where others see threats. He sees clearly because his mind is still. Samuel wanted that clarity to become his natural state. So he continued his training. Every day. Every moment. Every challenge. He learned to stand in the fire without flinching. He learned to breathe when the world rushed. He learned to wait when others panicked. And slowly, he became the lighthouse in the storm. He became the man who did not mirror the chaos around him. He became the man who mastered the storm within him. This is where part 2 ends and where your next challenge begins. Because the power to become unshakable is not in waiting for life to get easier. It is in training yourself to stay centered when life gets harder. Your mind can be rewired. Your reactions can be retrained. The question is simple. Will you choose discomfort long enough to grow past it? If you want, I can now create part 3. Part 3. The silence that strengthens the soul. Engaging hook. There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes something painful but freeing. Most of his weakness did not come from the world around him. It came from the approval he kept begging for. And the day he stops begging is the day he starts rising. Part 3. Samuel had mastered silence in conflict. He had learned how to stay calm when insulted and how to stand still when the world expected him to flinch. But there was another test waiting for him. A harder one. The test of living without the applause he once depended on. This lesson did not arrive through confrontation. It arrived quietly, like a whisper carried on a soft wind. It began with small moments. A coworker forgetting to compliment him on a project. A friend not responding with excitement when he shared good news. A relative giving advice no one asked for. And each moment felt heavier than it should have. Samuel noticed something uncomfortable. He cared too much. He cared about the nods, the reassuring smiles, the soft words that usually kept him steady. When others approved, he felt strong. When they hesitated, he doubted himself. His entire sense of direction shifted with the reactions of people who were not living his life. One evening after work, Samuel sat alone in his small apartment. The room was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. He stared at a blank notebook page in front of him. He wanted to write down a plan for his future. But every time he tried, the same thought returned. What will they think if I fail? He realized he had been carrying this question for years without noticing. It had shaped his decisions, softened his voice, and dimmed his ambition. He closed the notebook slowly and leaned back in his chair. For the first time in a long time, he asked himself a question that felt like a door unlocking. Whose approval are you working for? He thought about his manager. He thought about his friends. He thought about his family. He thought about strangers online. And a wave of truth washed over him. He had allowed people who did not know his dreams to influence how he chased them. He had allowed the world to steer him like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Samuel felt a tightness in his chest. A quiet disappointment in himself. But instead of sinking into shame, he took a deep breath. Awareness was not failure. It was the beginning of transformation. The next day, Samuel visited the old library where he used to read motivational books. He walked slowly down the aisles until he found a quiet corner near the window. He sat with an old leather-bound book that talked about purpose. One line struck him like lightning. A man becomes powerless when he lives for praise. But a man becomes unstoppable when he lives for purpose. He felt the words settle inside him like anchors. Strong. Heavy. True. Samuel realized something profound. Approval had become his silent master. It shaped his behavior more than fear or doubt ever did. When people applauded, he moved forward with confidence. When they stayed quiet, he hesitated. He was not living. He was performing. And that performance had cost him his identity. He remembered a moment from years earlier. He had been in school preparing to share an idea in front of the class. He had loved the idea. He believed in it. But when a few classmates laughed at him before he even started speaking, his confidence shattered. He rushed through the presentation and apologized at the end, even though he had done nothing wrong. It was a moment he had buried, but now he saw it clearly. That was the day he began chasing approval. That was the day he gave others permission to weaken his voice. Samuel closed his eyes. He breathed deeply. And he made a silent promise to himself. Never again. He began his new training the next day. It started with something simple. When he completed a task at work, he did not wait for praise. He simply checked it off and moved to the next task. When he shared an idea, he did not scan the room for reactions. Instead, he listened to his own inner signal. If it felt right to him, that was enough. The first challenge came quickly. During a meeting, Samuel suggested a new strategy. Several people in the room stayed silent. One person frowned. Another looked uninterested. In the past, this would have crushed him. But now, he sat calmly. He did not shrink. He did not backtrack. He did not soften his voice to be liked. He leaned forward slightly and said, "I believe this direction will improve results. I trust this idea." His voice did not shake. And something surprising happened. The room went quiet. People leaned in. Not because they approved, but because they sensed conviction. Approval follows confidence. But confidence must be built without it. Later that week, Samuel practiced another powerful exercise. He sat in silence for 15 minutes each morning. No music. No noise. No phone. Just stillness. At first, it was uncomfortable. His thoughts raced. His mind wanted distraction. But slowly, the noise inside him began to settle. The silence became a mirror. A place where he could finally hear his own voice. And that voice grew clearer day by day. He realized that he had always been surrounded by people but rarely connected to himself. Silence became the bridge point. One evening, Samuel met a friend for coffee. The friend talked about a new idea he was excited about. Then he looked at Samuel and asked for his opinion. Samuel shared his honest thoughts without bending them to be pleasing. The friend laughed lightly and disagreed. In the past, Samuel would have shifted his opinion to avoid discomfort. But this time, he simply smiled and stayed firm. It felt strange. It felt new. It felt powerful. He was breaking free from a lifetime of obedience to approval. Days turned into weeks. Samuel noticed something important. The less he chased approval, the stronger he felt. The more he trusted his instincts, the clearer his path became. The more he listened to himself, the more grounded he felt. His internal compass was no longer spinning. It was pointing forward with certainty. The need to be liked grew weaker. The desire to be true grew stronger. Samuel realized something beautiful. You cannot lead yourself while begging others to guide you. You cannot rise while kneeling before the opinions that weaken you. You cannot discover your voice while drowning in applause. He thought of a truth he had read in a Napoleon Hill book. No man becomes great by pleasing crowds. A man becomes great by obeying his own truth. Samuel was ready to obey his truth. Finally, part 3 ends here. If you want me to create part 4, just tell me. Part 4. The battle between noise and vision. Engaging hook. There is a moment in a man's life when he discovers that the loudest voice he hears is not the world outside him. It is the noise inside him. And until he wins that inner battle, the world will win every outer one. Part 4. Samuel had mastered silence during confrontation and had taken the first steps toward freeing himself from the need for approval. But now he faced the most persistent enemy of all. The noise of his own doubts. The voice that whispered every fear he had never spoken aloud. It began on a quiet Sunday morning. Samuel woke before sunrise. The city was still asleep. The streets outside his window were empty. He brewed a cup of coffee and sat by the window with the growing light painting the sky. He expected peace. Instead, his mind stirred with questions that felt heavier than any criticism the world could offer. What if you are fooling yourself? What if you are not ready for the life you want? What if your dream is bigger than your ability? He closed his eyes. The doubts felt like shadows moving behind him. They were familiar because he had lived with them for years. But now they felt larger because he was finally paying attention. Silence puts you face to face with the things you had been running from. Samuel took a slow breath. He remembered something he read in a Napoleon Hill book. Every man must defeat the enemy within before he defeats the enemy without. This thought gave him courage. He opened his eyes and whispered to himself, "It is time to face the noise." That day, Samuel decided to take a long walk. He walked through the city in a way he never had before. Not with a destination. Not with a goal. But with intention. He wanted to listen. Not to the world. But to the inner voice he had ignored for so long. As he walked, he noticed a construction site. Men were lifting heavy beams while machines roared through the air. Dust filled the sky. Noise surrounded him. And yet, in that moment, Samuel felt something powerful. Amid all that noise, every worker seemed focused. They did not stop to argue. They did not panic at the sound. They worked with precision because they were guided by the blueprint they carried in their minds. A thought struck Samuel. A man with a blueprint cannot be distracted by noise. He whispered to himself. You need your blueprint. For years, Samuel had moved through life with hope but without clarity. He walked toward success without defining it. He chased approval without understanding why. He reacted to life instead of building it. Now he understood that he needed something stronger than desire. He needed a vision so clear that doubt lost its footing. He reached a small park and sat on a bench under a tall tree. The wind brushed against the leaves, creating a soft rustling. Samuel pulled out his notebook and opened it to a blank page. He stared at it without writing. The silence around him felt like an invitation. He asked himself a question he had never dared to ask fully. What do you truly want your life to look like? Not what others expect. Not what would make people proud. Not what would silence critics. But what he wanted. His heart responded before his mind could interfere. He wanted to build something meaningful. He wanted to feel proud of his work. He wanted to grow into a man who walks into a room carrying quiet certainty. A man who is guided by purpose rather than permission. He wrote those words down. His vision did not need to be perfect. It only needed to be sincere. As the sun climbed higher, Samuel continued writing. He wrote about the man he wanted to become. Calm in conflict. Driven in purpose. Unshaken by opinions. Guided by inner clarity. And with every line he wrote, the noise inside him softened. Doubt began to sound less like a threat and more like an echo fading in the distance. He closed the notebook and felt a new sense of strength. This was the blueprint he needed. Vision gives structure. Structure gives clarity. Clarity gives calm. Calm gives power. It was a chain reaction building inside him. But the day was not done teaching him. Later that afternoon, Samuel met a friend who invited him to join a gathering. The room was full of voices, laughter, opinions, and arguments. People spoke loudly about their struggles, their victories, their frustrations. For the first time, Samuel noticed how often people speak without thinking. How often they repeat what they heard rather than what they believe. How often noise controls them. A man beside him complained about his job. Another man bragged about a project he barely contributed to. Two others argued about things they had no power to change. Samuel watched silently. Not judging. Observing. He realized something profound. Most men are not defeated by life. They are defeated by distraction. They drown in noise because they never learn how to listen inwardly. In that moment, Samuel felt calm. The room felt loud, but he did not feel pulled. He did not feel the urge to prove himself. He did not feel pressure to join their discussions. He was grounded in something far stronger than their voices. He was grounded in his own vision. Someone eventually turned to him and asked for his opinion. Samuel smiled and simply said, "I am listening today." His answer surprised them. It surprised him too. But it felt right. He left the gathering early and walked home under the evening sky. The city lights sparkled like distant stars. He felt lighter than he had in years. He was not running from noise. He was rising above it. At home, Samuel sat by his window again. The city was alive with movement and sound. But inside his mind, there was space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to grow. He realized something he wished he had learned years ago. The world does not quiet down for anyone. A man must learn to quiet himself. He felt a sense of gratitude. Every lesson he had learned so far had brought him closer to becoming the man he wanted to be. Silence had taught him strength. Rejection had taught him clarity. Approval had taught him dependency. And the battle with noise was teaching him direction. Samuel closed his eyes and pictured the path ahead. It was not easy. It was not comfortable. But it was his. And for the first time, he felt truly aligned with it. He whispered to the night, "I know where I am going now." And with those words, part 4 ends. If you want me to write part 5, just tell me. Part 5. The silent contract with yourself. Engaging hook. A man's life begins to change the moment he makes a promise to himself that he refuses to break. Not a loud promise. Not a public vow. A quiet contract written in the secret place of his own heart. Part 5. The morning came with a soft glow spreading across Samuel's bedroom. He sat at the edge of his bed with a thought weighing heavily on his mind. For weeks he had practiced silence. He had explored clarity. He had faced noise. But now a new challenge appeared. One that felt more powerful than all the others. Consistency. The difference between a dreamer and a builder. He made coffee and sat at the table with his notebook open. He stared at the pages filled with ideas, reflections, and truths he had uncovered over the past days. It all looked inspiring. But inspiration alone does not build a life. Inspiration is only the spark. Discipline is the fire. Samuel felt a familiar fear rise inside him. Every time he tried to change in the past, he had started strong and faded quickly. He had made promises during moments of motivation only to break them when life felt heavy. He knew this pattern too well. Now he refused to repeat it. He whispered to himself, "You must become a man who keeps his own word." The words hung in the air as if the room itself held them. A quiet contract. A sacred one. Samuel knew that if he was going to grow into the man he envisioned, he needed to create a system. A structure that would keep him steady even when his emotions shifted. He took the pen and wrote one sentence at the top of the page. "Your future depends on the promises you keep in private." The sentence shook him. It felt like a truth he had ignored for years. Every time he broke a promise to himself, he weakened his own spirit. Every time he quit on a goal, he taught himself that his word had no power. Now he wanted to reverse that. He wanted to build inner strength that did not depend on motivation. Strength that was built through small daily actions. He wrote 3 commitments in his notebook: wake with purpose, work with focus, end the day with gratitude. Simple, clear, powerful. But making commitments is easy. Keeping them is the real battle. That afternoon, Samuel walked through the city again. The world around him felt louder than usual. Cars honked. People argued. Music blasted from storefronts. Yet none of it bothered him. He felt centered. He felt like a man carrying a mission. A man who had chosen his direction. As he passed a cafe, he noticed a group of young men sitting together, talking loudly about their plans. One wanted to start a business. Another wanted to get in shape. A third wanted to become financially independent. Samuel listened quietly as he walked by. Their ideas were good. Their dreams were real. But he could hear the missing element. None of them had a plan. They were speaking out of excitement, not commitment. Samuel had been just like them once. A talker. A dreamer. Someone who spoke passionately about goals but acted only when it felt easy. Now he understood the truth. Success does not come to the man who talks loudly about his plans. It comes to the man who works quietly behind closed doors. He continued walking until he reached a quiet part of the city. Trees lined the streets. Birds sang in gentle rhythms. He sat on a stone bench and looked at the sky. He felt the weight of his new commitments. Not a heavy burden. A responsibility. Napoleon Hill once wrote that commitment is the first step toward mastery. Not desire. Not enthusiasm. Commitment. The willingness to stay on the path even when the excitement fades. Samuel closed his eyes and imagined his future self. A man who wakes early with purpose. A man who moves with direction. A man who does not waste time or energy on things that do not matter. A man whose inner peace is stronger than outer pressure. A man who keeps his promises with the same seriousness that a soldier keeps his oath. He opened his eyes and felt a surge of determination. Later that evening, Samuel returned home. The sun was setting, casting warm colors across his room. He sat at his desk and took out a second notebook. This one he kept blank for a reason. Tonight he would use it to record his daily progress. Not to show anyone. Not to impress anyone. But to build his own inner accountability. He wrote the date and wrote 3 simple questions. Did you wake with purpose? Did you work with focus? Did you end with gratitude? He answered honestly. Not perfectly. But honestly. And honesty was the foundation of growth. As he wrote, Samuel realized something powerful. Success is not built through big gestures. It is built through small, consistent steps repeated until they become part of who you are. A quiet promise kept every day eventually becomes a powerful identity. That night Samuel reflected on his old habits. He remembered how often he gave up when things felt difficult. He remembered how easily he let distractions pull him away. He remembered how many times he quit before giving himself a real chance. But he also realized something else. Those days were gone. Not because life had changed, but because he had changed. He looked in the mirror and saw a man who was beginning to trust himself. A man who believed in his own word. A man who no longer needed approval from others because he had earned approval from himself. This was new. This was strength. The kind that builds from the inside out. As he prepared for bed, he stood by the window and watched the city lights flicker like stars scattered across the ground. He felt calm. He felt steady. He felt ready. He whispered to himself. Keep your promises. Every single one. These words became his final thought of the night. A reminder. A vow. A silent contract that would guide him toward the life he was building. And in that quiet moment, Samuel finally understood the truth. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is self-respect. And a man with self-respect becomes unstoppable. Part 5 ends with Samuel stronger, clearer, and more committed than ever. If you want Part 6, tell me and I will create it in the same style. Part 6. The Unshakable Man. Engaging hook. There comes a moment when a man realizes he is no longer moved by the chaos around him. He is no longer controlled by approval or fear. He is no longer reacting to life. He is leading it. And that man is unstoppable. Part 6. Samuel had walked a long road. He had faced rejection without flinching. He had found clarity in silence. He had freed himself from the craving for approval. He had built a blueprint for his life and made a quiet contract with himself. But now he faced the ultimate test, living every day as the man he had committed to becoming. It was a bright morning when Samuel stepped into his office. He had prepared for weeks for a major presentation. This time, it was not about proving himself to anyone else. It was about demonstrating the discipline, vision, and calm he had cultivated within. The room was crowded with colleagues, managers, and even a few clients he had never met. They would judge him. They would criticize. But Samuel was no longer seeking their approval. He was speaking from purpose. As he began, a few people exchanged doubtful glances. Some whispered quietly. Samuel felt the old urge to react. The old impulse to soften his words, to impress, to fight for their applause. But he remembered the journey. He remembered the silence that built his strength. He remembered the contract he made with himself. He breathed deeply, kept his posture steady, and continued. Calm. Clear. Confident. He spoke not to be liked. He spoke to convey vision. He spoke to share truth. And something remarkable happened. The room leaned in. Not because they were forced. Not because they were impressed with performance. But because they felt conviction. They sensed a man who was centered, steady, and in command of his mind. A man who had mastered himself. When he finished, the room erupted, not in applause, but in respect. People approached him with questions, curiosity, and a quiet admiration. Samuel smiled, but inside he felt even more powerful. This was not about recognition. It was about mastery. About becoming a man whose life was guided by purpose, not opinion. Later that evening, Samuel reflected on the journey he had taken. Each step had been small, but together they built a fortress around his mind. Rejection had taught resilience. Silence had taught clarity. Freedom from approval had taught self-reliance. Daily commitments had taught discipline. And now, the combination of all those lessons had created something profound. He was unshakable. He remembered the words of Napoleon Hill. Strength and success begin in the mind. A man who controls his thoughts, his reactions, and his vision will shape the life he desires. Everything else is noise. Everything else is distraction. Samuel understood that no external event could break him. A harsh word, a failed deal, a critical glance, none of it could touch him unless he allowed it. He had trained his mind, and now his mind was his ally. He had become the master of his emotions, the leader of his thoughts, and the commander of his own destiny. He looked out of his window at the city lights. They flickered like reminders of the countless challenges waiting for him in the future. He did not fear them. He welcomed them. Because every challenge was an opportunity to practice what he had learned. Every obstacle was a chance to demonstrate calm, clarity, and purpose. Every difficulty was a moment to grow stronger. That night, he sat at his desk and wrote a final note to himself. A note to remind him of the man he had become. The note read, Samuel, remember this. Your mind is your fortress. Your discipline is your armor. Your vision is your compass. Do not give away your power. Do not chase approval. Do not flinch from discomfort. Live with purpose. Lead with calm. Rise unshaken. He placed the pen down and closed his notebook. A sense of peace settled over him. He knew that life would continue to test him. It always would. But now he had everything he needed to meet those tests without fear. Without doubt. Without being swayed by the opinions or actions of others. He had become unshakable. Samuel's story is not just about him. It is about anyone willing to walk the same path. The path of self-mastery. The path of discipline. The path of purpose. The path of calm. It is about refusing to react impulsively, about refusing to give your power to others, and about training your mind so deeply that chaos cannot touch you. If you want to rise in life, start where Samuel started. Face your fears. Sit in silence. Free yourself from the need for approval. Write your blueprint. Make your commitments. Keep them. And practice calm in every storm. One day, you will realize that nothing can shake you, because you have built strength inside that no one can reach. You have become the unshakable man, The journey is not easy. It is not quick. But the rewards are immeasurable. You will gain clarity, confidence, and authority over your own life. You will walk through the world with the quiet power of a man who knows his value. You will inspire not by noise but by example. You will show others the strength of self-mastery without saying a word. That is true power. That is true freedom. That is living on purpose. So start today. Begin with small steps. Practice silence when your emotions scream. Stand firm when the world expects you to bow. Commit to your promises when no one is watching. And above all, remember this: your reaction is the key to your destiny. Guard it. Train it. Master it. The unshakable life is yours to claim. Call to action. If Samuel's journey inspired you, take the first step today. Commit to your own silent contract. Rise above noise, chase excellence over approval, and train your mind to remain unshaken. Share this story with someone who needs it. Comment below on your first step, and subscribe for more life-changing insights that help you build strength, purpose, and unstoppable discipline.